Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all well. It's been an eventful couple of days. Yesterday, we had the march in London, and lots of us gathered at the Royal Courts of Justice and made our way to Trafalgar Square. It was absolutely incredible. There was literally thousands, tens of thousands of people there yesterday. It was an absolutely amazing day. Um, the whole of Trafalgar Square was literally full of good feeling, nice atmosphere, flags, patriotic people who just want to preserve our way of life. However, today we've had the news that Tommy Robinson has been arrested under the 2000 Terrorism Act, which means they can hold him for 14 days. Obviously, the numbers of people yesterday and the fact that everybody behaved and that we are beginning to show increasing unity is terrifying them. But this is just the beginning. Now, more importantly, today we have had this news of this hate preacher who just seems to have appeared out of nowhere. I mean, I wouldn't know him, but then I don't keep track of these people. And his name is Sheikh Yasser al-Habib. He came here from Kuwait and sought asylum 20 years ago after he spent a stretch in prison in Kuwait because this guy is obviously a fanatic Shiite Muslim, and he went to prison for insulting the Sunnis. And since he's been here, he has done nothing but stir up hate. He runs a TV, satellite TV channel. I think it's called Fight TV or whatever it's called, Fadak TV. And through this Fadak TV, which goes out to hundreds of thousands of people who follow him, he's raised a total of £3 million. Now, he lives in a village, in the village of Fulmer in South Buckinghamshire, and he's now campaigning or asking them to send more money because he wants to raise 3.5 million because he wants to buy the Isle of Torsa, which is off the west coast of Scotland. And get this, he wants to create a Shiite Islamic state on this island, a home for Shia Muslims. He wants to build a school, he wants to build a hospital, he wants to build a mosque, the usual. And here's the really nutty part. He's saying that he wants special permission to be able to bring in Muslims, Shiite Muslims, from around the world to live on this idyllic island, which will be a Shiite utopia, just a mile long, by the way, without requiring visas for them. Now, that's going to happen. The fact that it's being negotiated, though, or it's being discussed, even for him to buy the island for this purpose, should worry people because this, as always, is just the thin end of the wedge. Now, again, I wasn't aware of this, but he's obviously quite well off. He has a large estate in Buckinghamshire, and he already runs military style training camps, which means that he effectively has his own small, well, I assume it's small, personal army. Now, if he actually manages to buy this island and they build a mosque and they inhabit it as a sort of a living under Sharia law, what do you think the odds are that anyone of authority will be able to set foot on that island and see what's going on? Um, they will scream blue murder. I was going to use another one, but they might find it offensive. Anyway, but so they will basically be free to plot, to scheme, to organize themselves, to do anything that they want. And this little islet is literally, I believe, just 75 feet away from the next one, just by just by a small stretch of water, uh, which I believe you have to go cross over to the other island and then cross by ferry. Then you can drive to the mainland or directly to the mainland where the nearest road is. It's about 5 kilometers. That's if you think about it, that's a fraction of the distance that people get across of the channel, and people get across that in a dinghy. So that will literally become a religious military stronghold, and that will just be the thin end of the wedge. This is extremely worrying, and the fact that they want to do this here in the UK demonstrates that the UK, as well as Europe, is on their radar for their war against Christianity and against our way of life. Unfortunately, that's how it is. Now, I have myself said on many occasions, well, there's only 4 million of them in the UK, which, although that is a significant number, as a proportion of the population, it's quite small, and the behaviour we've seen over the last few months, and the demands, and even the sense of entitlement, is something we wouldn't expect until they'd reached maybe 15 million or more. But here's the gremlin. We now have, sadly, uh, the worst bunch of clowns in government for years, and that's saying something because the ones before them were no good either. So imagine how bad this lot are. But the problem is, Keir Starmer is desperate to get back in the EU good books, and he'll make any number of concessions to get there. So already we know from the criminals, illegal migrants, sorry, they call them irregular migrants, don't they? I'll stick with criminals. He's basically scrapped Rwanda, so they know they're not going to Rwanda. He's basically made it clear they can't be deported back where they came from, because if they come from Iran, Afghanistan, etc., we can't do anything with those countries unless we literally put a parachute on them and throw them off a plane. There's nothing we can do. That's why the only option was a third country. And on top of this, he's also capitulated to grant them all the right to claim asylum. There's, I believe, 120 odd thousand of them, of which, based on past figures, between 70 and 90,000 of them should be granted asylum, and they'll be free to roam around. But on top of this, Starmer will more than likely sign up to a cooperation agreement with the EU to take a quota of their migrants, which will create a constant, ongoing trickle. Do not be fooled. That trickle will never reduce. There's only one way it will go up. Those numbers will go. That's upwards. But here's the most dangerous part, or the most worrying. He has also been hinting at freedom of movement within Europe. Things have changed rapidly in the last 4 or 5 years. The greatest change has literally been since October last year, because thanks to the pathetic show from our police forces, the capitulation to people in our capital city, waving terrorist flags, celebrating acts of terrorism, calling for a democratic state to be destroyed, wreaking havoc and getting away with it, we have now opened Pandora's box. And if we have freedom of movement again, that figure I mentioned of this particular group in the UK of 4 million could suddenly change overnight, because throughout Europe, there's nearly 50 million. And if there were freedom of movement, and we did have some sort of civil unrest, we could have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, just make their way here to get involved, simply because they have an EU passport and we have freedom of movement. The possibilities, the risks, the threat to us it beggars belief. As far as this guy goes, this cannot be allowed to happen. But unfortunately, it is the nature of the mentality that we are dealing with that they push things constantly and they constantly push the boundaries. This is not by accident, it is by design. It happens in every way, shape or form. Look for every opportunity to humiliate, look for every opportunity to be offended. Make those who are your target feel guilty, to feel that they have done wrong, to feel that they are privileged, etc., etc., etc. Undermine their society politically, socially, morally, defile their culture, their their faith, their women, everything, destroy it and weaken it brick by brick until they can enforce what they want on our country. And our leaders, treacherous as they are facilitating this. And this is what is really, really worrying. But in the last few months, this has accelerated. So freedom of movement now, if we were to have it again now, would not be the same as it was previously. If we were to have freedom of movement, we will be at the risk of being flooded with people, the very people who despise us, at any time. It's almost like all they would need would be a call to arms, and we would actually find ourselves under threat from a religious army. Why would anybody be training a small army in a pretty village, idyllic village in the middle of Buckinghamshire? And then add to that the person who is running this is a hate preacher. He runs a satellite TV channel that has been complained about by people on all sides and still hasn't been pulled down. And he has designs on his own caliphate, his own Islamic state. And he's that delusional that he actually believes that it's possible that he could just bring people in because they are they are Shiite Muslims, to live on this island state that he wishes to create. Um, it's it's a horrifying thought. Um, there is also the problems in terms of divisions between the different factions. Uh, Shiite Muslims and Sunni Muslims uh, absolutely generally despise each other. In fact, the fact that Israel is in the middle of them in that area um, is is an inconvenience in many ways, because it's not about the land. It is hate for the people, a historical hate that goes back all the way to the 6th century. But were Israel not there, if it were, magically moved to another continent, there would not be peace across the Middle East, because they would be fighting each other. It's just that, unfortunately, Israel is a distraction, because it goes back to the early days before they even broke off into Sunni and Shiite Muslims. So they collectively hate Israel. Uh, so you have Iran, Shiite, Hezbollah, funded by Iran, and then you have the others as well, who are Sunni. And now, as you may be aware, Hezbollah actually successfully fired a rocket into Israel. So the next movement of Israel will be probably to seek out Hezbollah in the Golan Heights and beyond and totally destroy them. So we will have even more of the victim card from these people when that goes when that operation begins. But Israel has a right to defend its borders, and it must do so, because if it doesn't, then it is effectively the last bastion before the attack moves on to Europe. And these people need to understand that. But sadly, we have these fanatics who are undermine their own country, their own history, their own culture, and everything that we have to be proud of in this country. And I cannot understand why they would be so determined to destroy our society. As one person put it, there has been a communist coup in this country, but we just haven't noticed it. And it's been done in a subtle way. It's been a revolution of minds, indoctrination, manipulation, brainwashing, and all manner of things that have just crept up on us. And we will wake up one day, and the society that we know and love will have gone forever. Uh, Good evening. I hope you're well. Tiger Roo, brilliant analysis and extremely worrying, especially as so many are asleep to this. I know, and I need to get this across. I really need to get this across, and I'm trying to tread so very, very carefully. In fact, I just made a 60-second short. It's on YouTube, but it's fine. Just announcing that Tommy Robinson had been arrested after the march yesterday, which was peaceful. We don't know the details. It was under the Terrorism Act of 2000, and I'll update you further. Something along those lines. I put it on TikTok, and it was taken down for inappropriate material. So have to be so careful. But people need to know, and it's not through ignorance. People have their lives, their bills to pay, etc. And life just passes you by, and sometimes, which is what they want. They just want people to not even notice, and they just want people to just pick up little fleeting glances of the headlines, their headlines. This is the reason the mainstream media despise anybody new in the media, because they want to control the narrative. And the vast portion of the world's media is owned by just a handful of people. They control the narrative, they control everything, and they don't want anybody dancing on their parade at all, and they won't allow it. Benny Bulldog, this will continue to happen no matter what party gets in. This country, what was called England, will be lost without a shot being fired, and all those that fought to protect England died for nothing. Uh, Sadly, I believe that you're right, but I'm taking the position that all is not lost. I'm taking the position that we can and must fight back. I'm taking the position that our country, our way of life, our entire continent, because this is not just about England or the UK, it's about the whole continent of Europe, let alone the West as a whole. This is throughout Europe and throughout the West. And Europe is even further ahead and worse than we are. But I don't know what is actually really happening throughout Europe behind the scenes, because Germany's silence has been thunderous over the last few weeks. If you've noticed, apart from that mosque being closed down, we've not really heard anything, to be honest. And I'm getting the feeling that within Germany, from little things that I've picked up on, that Germany is turning hostile very, very quickly, and things are happening in Germany that they do not want us to know. This is why we're hardly hearing anything. France, Paris, well, we're fully aware what's happening there. I don't know what the French will do, whether they will fight back or not. I really don't know. But they need to, because their country is in serious danger now. And have no doubt that the tide is changing throughout Europe. Meloni is under serious pressure to change her position and her attitude towards the migrants. In Greece, we're not hearing as much about the migrants, but they are resorting to drastic measures to stop them and or to deal with them, and they are getting to the point where they're just ignoring the EU, the ECHR, the directives, everything. They are taking matters into their own hands. Poland and Hungary, as you know, will not tolerate it. Following a border guard in Poland being killed by a migrant who threw a spear over the border, the Polish government have now changed the law, and border guards are allowed or permitted to use live rounds on migrants. Those migrants now are actually, they're not just trying to break into the country illegally, but they are now armed migrants. Whether it's sticks and stones or spears, they are armed. They've already killed someone, and it will only get worse. But then that raises another question, because those migrants reaching Poland have come through Belarus. And knowing what Belarus and Russia are like, somehow I really don't think it's possible for hundreds of migrants to just walk through a country from one end of the other without being noticed or picked up. So, are the migrants simply deciding to take that route and they're just being allowed to? Are they being directed to? Is Russia and its puppet Belarus actually instigating some of this mass migration in order to undermine us and destroy us, perhaps with China involved in the background? I'm not really sure. But something tells me that these migrants don't just suddenly decide that they're going to try and break in through Poland. And if they go through this country here and cross the whole country to the Polish border, that then they can try and get across the Polish border. Somebody must have directed them. Somebody must have helped them through, waved them through, fed them along the way, etc., etc. Who? That I don't know. Paolo, good evening. My fear of this island affair is he would eventually declare a separate state, and then they would have diplomatic immunity, opening a giant can of worms. They would do that in no time. That's what he's saying. He wants it to be a separate state. He is saying it's going to be a separate state, and he wants to bypass visas so that he can fly his friends in, and they can all live there happily. Millions of them on 20 acres or whatever it is. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's not going to happen. It is just a starting point. That's all it is. And they are expansionists. If you give them one, they want two. If you give them two, they want five. That goes in every single area, whether it is pounds and pence, whether it is rights, whether it is apologies, whether it is priorities, whatever it is, because they are not here because they want to be here. They are here because they despise us, and that is why they are here, because they are here on a holy mission to destroy us, and people just cannot see it. And we so often hear the excuses from people who justify and excuse people's beliefs, but ultimately, there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, if somebody says, I am of the same belief, but I'm moderate, if they were genuinely moderate, would they not openly name and shame and condemn, whether it's an individual, a collection of people, or the entire belief? If you take an apostate, which there are many, and in fact, the largest growing number of apostates are actually in Iran, where I believe 50,000 out of 70,000 mosques have closed. This is why these nutters are getting so desperate, because the younger people are just not interested. They're not paying any attention. And these miserable old nutters want the entire country to be as miserable as they are. And they are refusing. And this is making them resort to trying to cause even more trouble, because their only mission is one that is motivated by malice and hate. It is nothing to do with faith in the conventional way whatsoever. Um, so yes, I think you're right, but he's openly basically saying that, isn't he? Paolo, it is not the friends I would be too worried about. It is what contraband. Um, Not sure what exactly you mean. What you mean there? It is not the friends, as in their friends. 1 minute, just a moment, because I think I've missed something here. Sorry. Let me just go back to the previous one. I'm sorry. Right. Ex Muslims have warned the UK over and over again that they are going to do this, try to take over, but was told you are mad, racist, and Islamophobic. Yes, absolutely. This is what we have heard so many times, again and again and again. But these terms are catch all to silence people, because ultimately, phobia is a fear of whatever it may be, as in arachnophobia. You can't prosecute someone for fearing spiders, because if a spider can bite, or if something can harm you, or if you perceive that it can harm you, then it is normal to fear it or dislike it. How can it be an offence to dislike or fear something that you know to be a threat to you? So the question is is a logical fear of something that is a clear and obvious and blatant and a threat that has been made publicly, uh, an offence? Or is it something that everybody should be thinking, if I do not take this fear seriously, this threat seriously, then effectively, then we are doomed, maybe. Uh, Scooby Dog, you are spot on. The radical Muslim is the snake in the grass. The so-called moderate Muslims is the grass that the snake is allowed to hide in. Yeah, again, I have to tread really carefully here, but let me put this as an example. Let me pick on, well, I don't know what the Moonies believe, or the Scientologists, or any of these people, but let's pick on the Moonies. Yes, a hypothetical would be a bit safer at this point. Now, I don't know what they preach or what they believe, but let's just say that effectively it is something that is a threat to those around them. Then would you consider somebody who continues to identify as a as a Mooney? This is working well, isn't it? Uh, a moderate one. Would you consider a moderate Nazi to be a nice person because he says he's moderate, for example? I think not. But if somebody was part of whatever, born into it, groomed into it, forced into it, and they step away from it and they say, this, I was here, I want nothing to do with it, that's a different story. So this is where the question lies. Is somebody who is genuinely intent on integrating, is it the one who will openly say, I believe that there's a creator and so on, but I absolutely condemn all of these teachings because I will not live by them and I don't care whether they like it or not, or the one who says, well, I'm moderate. I won't dispute any of this, and certainly not publicly, but I'm moderate. I just want to be peaceful. Um, Many of these fanatics were the peaceful ones. Many of the fanatics that we have here were born here. They're second and third generation. So this is the question that we need to ask. But we're almost at the point where we can't even have these conversations anymore, not in a sensible discussion, because it is always met with hostility and threats and abuse, and the law. And why would anybody shut down any debate unless they do not want to reach the ultimate conclusion that sensible dialogue often results in? The only time people want to shut down an argument is because they know that they have lost the argument or they would lose the argument. And that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. And that's not to say that anybody who's born into whatever faith it may be is a bad person, not at all, or should be judged in that way. But what I'm saying is ultimately, there will be a time, and it's not that far away, where people won't be able to sit on the fence anymore. That privilege will be denied. And all those who know what is happening but don't have the courage to stand up for what they believe in and to stand up for their country, and more importantly, for their children and for their grandchildren, um, they have blood on their hands because they are just too gutless to fight. So they're going to leave the fight to their offspring, to their descendants, because they won't fight themselves. And that's if their descendants even have the opportunity to fight, of course. That is what concerns me. Uh, Paolo, visitors to the island, it is what arms, etc., they could import under diplomatic immunity. Then, if they opened an embassy on the mainland, we are looking at a very major threat. Sorry, yes, yeah, I completely agree. This is what the point that I said. The minute that they establish anything remotely along the lines of what they're saying, which the worrying part is, they could probably do it. They could probably do it incrementally anyway without anybody being able to stop them. Because if they were to buy that island and they were to build a mosque there and house themselves there, it's a tiny island, they own the island, they would at that point, as they would, push the boundaries and they wouldn't let anybody in. And if any official wanted to go to the island, they would scream blue murder and use every single threat you can think of, from Islamophobia to racism to whatever it may be, to stop anybody going there. We won't know what is going on there, and who knows what the next step could be. And Paolo, yes, you're right, that could possibly happen. It could go anyway, even without being alarmist, even just looking as a minimum, just the very notion that a hate preacher wants to buy an island, that he has raised the money almost from donations by preaching hate globally and asking for donations, that he has his own training camp under our noses. He wants to buy this island and designate it a Sharia, a Sharia state, albeit in name, albeit spiritually, religiously, whatever you want to call it. Do you think any of our leaders really have the guts to deal with a situation that will effectively be our very own Gaza in the UK in no time? And that will just be the start of it. Scooby Dog, exactly. Paolo, I always find religion like politics. No matter what bad the hive does, the members always support it, and that is true of all parties and religions. Uh, yes, yes, that. That you're probably right. To be perfectly honest, um, they have a lot to answer for, don't they? They really, really do have a lot to answer for, um, and the direction that we're going is terrifying. Diana Jones, the owner of the island, has said they won't sell to him. I didn't know that. Thank you, Diana. I'm very, very pleased to hear that. Let's see if what they will look out for next, because if this is what they have in mind, will they find another one? I don't know. That would be that is worrying, and I am delighted to hear that. I really, really am. But the agenda remains, and this declaration of the intention of a Sharia state, independent, that should clearly demonstrate to you what people like this man are thinking and what they want, and we don't fit in to their plans. Mark, right. I just watched your video on Tommy arrest, then this popped up. Well, welcome, Mark. Yes, I did a short as well, which went on TikTok, got taken down. I don't know why. I do try and tread carefully, I really do, but sometimes I'm literally just overwhelmed with anger and fear at what we're facing, and I do need to temper what I'm saying a little, because we don't have much leeway nowadays, and that's so sad. I so miss the days when we could literally just have a pop at each other in the pub, and it would be the end of it. 1930s on repeat, yes, or worse. And with all of these, with everything that's going on with the EU, that is a repeat of the last two world wars. Keep in mind, we got dragged into both wars because of treaties. World War One began with an assassination in Sarajevo, and before you know it, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was at war, and through previous treaties and alliances, the UK got dragged into it, into the Great War, where so many died. And the end of the war, it was never again. And literally, 21 years after the end of World War One, when Germany invaded Poland, why did we get dragged into it? Because we had a treaty with Poland from the 19th century. That's how we got dragged into it. And now this nutter we've got in charge is desperate to tie us into the European army, into this, into that, whereas we should, for once, be looking out for our own country, our own borders, our own people, and everybody else can get on with it. Uh, this article about it, the article about it is on the Mail Online. Yes, Diane, I saw it there, and I believe it's on. It's in the Express, and I did see a few snippets. I was looking around everywhere to see what I could gather about it, pick up, but I didn't really put together any more than what I've said, really, to be honest. Apart from what you've told me, which I'm very, very grateful for. I don't know where you saw that, but I'm grateful that you've let us know. So I shall be watching how this unfolds closely. Paolo, we have survived for near a couple of thousand years because we are an island. We cannot afford to have, apart from Ireland, some foreign entity camping out on the doorstep if we are to continue. Uh, this is the greatest threat to the group of people who have become, you know, the the British race. That includes the people that have come in the last few decades, the last few centuries, the last few millennia, uh, because it is a way of life, it is a culture, it is so many common factors that make up the people of Great Britain. And this society of ours is now at its most vulnerable since the last war, I would say. In fact, possibly more so, because the last war wasn't directed initially at us, at the UK, because, as I said previously, the UK's entry to the war was because Germany was unaware of our treaty with Poland. They did not want to go to war with us. These people not only want to go to war with us, but they want to destroy us. Don't think for 1 minute that many of the events that are happening are simply down to a few rogue individuals here or there. Don't think that the grooming, the sex attacks, all of this is just simply a handful of rogue people. This is orchestrated, encouraged, and facilitated by the people who influence them and brainwash them, all with an agenda. And those in our society who hide it, who cover for it, those who covered up for the grooming gangs in Rotherham and elsewhere, because they're all over the country, they are just as guilty for every rape, for every attack, for every act of violence, because they are a part of the problem. One way or another, they're just as guilty. Oh, sorry, I think I've missed one here. No, I haven't. Next one. I'm new here too. You make sense, chap. Frightening times in the. Good evening, Moonhawk. Thank you very much for joining me. Um, I am going to find some positive current affairs to discuss sooner or later, and I'd even had a couple of ideas for today. And then what happens today? Poor old Tommy Robinson gets arrested, and then this guy popped up at me, and I've been seething about it all day long. Um, just for the record, to everyone who is watching, if you don't know much about me, obviously you know my name. It's Anthony Antonio. I'm a parish councillor. I live in a village called Kingsthorpe in Northampton. I've been a parish councillor since last year, and I love being a parish councillor, particularly because it's not political. When we get together once a month, it's a lovely group of people, and we all get together and think of ways that we can do something good for the parish of Kingsthorpe. I stood in the last election for Reform UK for Northampton North. It went well, even though it took us by surprise. I would have loved to have had many more months to fight my fight, but as you know, I didn't, we didn't. So it was literally uh, setting out from a standing start. By the time I even got going and got a few people to help me, we were halfway through the campaign. Nevertheless, still did well. After the campaign, I actually didn't really stand down. There was nothing to stand down from. But after the campaign, I said that I would stand down until the party is democratized. Because for me, my biggest motive for everything political is democracy. I absolutely love democracy, and we don't have democracy. And that must extend from the very bottom to the very top, because no one person, no group of people can ever be trusted to have their hand on the tiller of the country. Never, because power corrupts. There is only one way that those in power can be held to account, and that is by you. And with the party, I appreciate that they've got plans to sort things out. That's fine. Let's wait and see. For me, for me to stand again, I want every paying supporter in this constituency to be a voting member. I want every voting member to be invited to a meeting. We should arrange to have public meetings for the members once a month. We could do it at a social club, a rugby club, etc. They'd be, I'm sure, grateful for a little bit of extra income. We don't have to go and buy a building or anything like that. It could be our local headquarters. I would myself do my utmost to encourage other people to stand, young, old, male, female, doesn't matter, because I do not and will not accept to be just the default candidate. I want whoever is elected to represent this constituency to be elected by the voting members and to be the one that they choose. If that's me, that would be great, because nobody's more up for a fight than I am. But if they choose someone else who's younger, smarter, better looking, so be it. I would support them 100%. But it's about democracy. And until that time, I'll carry on as I am. Given the opportunity to stand in a democratic vote, I will. I just feel that there's a sense of urgency because candidates are they've been left in limbo a little bit, even though they are the official spokesperson. They're not the candidates, and they need to be elected so that they know that they are the elected candidate, voted in by the party members, because the fight starts now. It doesn't start when the next election is called. We need to be fighting now, and we really, really do have a lot to fight for. Anyway, that's where I am, and that's how I feel, and those are my reasons. I did upset a few people by saying, "Okay, I'm standing down because I don't agree with this. I'm sorry." Much as nothing would give me greater pleasure, nothing would be a greater honour than be able to walk into Westminster and fight on behalf of the people of Northampton. But I'm not selling my soul to get there. I'm sorry. Okay, Paolo, welcome, Moon. Okay, Richard Costello, parliamentary surrendered to 200 IRA. What are they going to do if things get out of control in this country? I don't know. I really don't know. My concern is, at the moment, is to do, and I would like to inspire others, because I'm just a small voice. There are people out there with much louder voices than myself. We need, firstly, not to react, not to be provoked, not to facilitate turning our country into a war zone, but we must be strong, we must be firm, and I know that when the British people decide enough is enough, you know that they are not a pushover. Governments, other countries, other dictators have made the terrible mistake, and I use this quite frequently. Do not confuse kindness with weakness. You are the 80%, if not more. The lefties, the perverts, the weirdos, the globalists, they are the minority. They fear you far more than any of us fear them. It's just that it's a game of charades, it's a game of bluff, and all of these sick people are in key positions in the media, in government, etc., which means that they can magnify and amplify their voice and their opinions and enforce them on everybody else. But have no doubt that if the majority decide to turn, the minority will run for their lives. That goes for the vast majority of these insidious virtue signaling hypocrites who receive such huge salaries, sat there lying to us. The BBC, who have an army of thugs demanding money with menaces from innocent people to pay their own troops, army of perverts to lie to us. It's no wonder that they feel so strongly about fake news, because the only fake news they want us to hear is theirs. And we must not forget that. You saw the salaries when they were released last week, the obscene amounts that they are paying themselves, and yet they will think nothing of intimidating some poor person in their 70s who's been paying into the system all of their life. And now we have these Marxist, disturbed, deranged people who seem to resent our culture, our society, our history, our race, everything about us, doing everything they can to undermine it and destroy it. But if we let this happen, it will be our fault, because anybody who has the interest to know what's going on in this country now has the opportunity to learn. After all, we have Maya Tuzi now. There's no excuse for not knowing what is going on, and he's just one of a handful. There's not many. There really isn't that many, but there's enough. It is possible to find out the truth, and find out what is going on. But please do not listen to the BBC or Channel 4 or Sky News. And nearly all of their presenters are just as guilty. They have sold their soul. And the going rate, well, I thought it was 30 pieces of silver, but for many of them, it's well over $1 million a year, isn't it? Or not far off. So that's where we are. And on a positive note, if enough people are inspired, if enough people say enough is enough, if enough people refuse to be bullied, and I know that's difficult, because if you work, as I've said before, if you work in the civil service, in the NHS, if you're a teacher, there's a poor teacher who's been barred for life, a young man, because he refused to conform to this gender nonsense. This is what they do, or they'll close your bank account down. But there's more than one way to get around this. And at some point, every one of us is going to be called upon, directly or indirectly, to make a choice. Are we going to stand up for ourselves, our community, our country, and our way of life? Or are we going to sell our souls and be in league with Lucifer? It's one or the other. There is no in between, not anymore. And on that note, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you all again next time, and hopefully tomorrow evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.